listening to From the Pink Seats podcast of the State of Louisville Podcast Network. Now, here's your hosts, Jacob Lane, Matt McGavin, and Vince LoCoco.
Ho, ho, ho. What a great Christmas we all got. Hopefully, we all had a great Christmas, great holiday season. What you won't find under your tree is a victory from Louisville in a bowl game in 2023. Very unfortunate, but the reality of the situation. We're going to get into all of that on From the Pink Seats podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in here in what is the last game recap of the season. Of course, we're going to have a lot of off-season content, but man, it really has quickly come to an end for Louisville football. Again, we'll dive into everything that happened on the USC game, dive into the holidays, all the fun shenanigans. I all of a sudden, Matt, have a hankering for Pop-Tarts, so I might leave the show mid-episode to go get myself some Pop-Tarts. We'll see. I'm also going to do my best to avoid going into a rage of cough. I've had the worst cough. I might have bronchitis. I might have I got something, man. I got the December funk in me. So we're going to try to avoid that today on the show, but we can't thank you all enough for tuning in. Matt, how was your holidays, buddy?
It was pretty good. I mean, low key, went over to my mom's house for Christmas, kind of had a smattering of family members there. There wasn't the whole brigade, but, you know, there was enough people there to, you know, enjoy myself. What about yourself?
Everything was great, man. I love the holiday season with a 6 and a 2-year-old because it's just all about giving. At that point, obviously, not much that I'm expecting as a dad in terms of receiving gifts, but the kids, Santa came and did his thing. Elf on the shelf continues to be a hit on the house. So it was a great time, man. Really have done a lot of resting this week. Been off of work, so have not moved out of my bed much. Watched a lot of bowl football. It's been great, man. Really can't complain. Outside of the loss for Louisville against USC, which again, there's a lot to get into on this one. It's been a great time, but I will say I'll start the show off. Shout out Kern's Corner. Vince went over there impromptu on a Friday. Popped in, got a burger, got some chili on his way out to Florida, which is why Vince is not on the show today, just myself and Matt. But I want to say, Matt, this past weekend, one of the things I did before Christmas was I went to the pop-up bar at Frankfort Avenue Liquors and Wine. Shout out to Frankfort Avenue Liquors and Wine. They bring you From the Pink Seats podcast. Frosty is the name of the bar, and it is a great time, Matt. It is a great time. I had a couple of different drinks, the favorite being a Prosecco. Prosecco. Sorry,
Prosecco.
I always want to say prosciutto, which is obviously not the right. Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a shot of prosciutto.
Hey, I bet Vince has taken a shot of prosciutto before. That's the most Italian thing about him, I'm sure. But the drink was fantastic, man. I cannot applaud those guys and gals over there enough for the work that they've done. Shout out to Chip. Shout out to the whole team over there at Frankfort Avenue Liquors and Wine. Check them out. 2115 Frankfort Avenue, right next to the Manhattan Project, over there in the Clifton area. Great spot, full liquor store, and then you've got the bar, man. And the bar is brilliant. It is great. Great atmosphere in there. Took the family. They really enjoyed it. So anyways, all of that to say, shout out to our sponsors. Been a great holiday season. Jolly and merry as what we are here on this podcast, but not because of football. That's unfortunate. But so let's just dive right into it. As I mentioned, no Vince. So no Vince's game notes today. We're just going to kind of reball this and talk about the game as it kind of unfolded, our perspectives. Obviously, Matt covered the game. I much more watched it at home. I had to rush back because we had a family Christmas on Wednesday night, Matt. Started the game in my wife's grandparents' living room in a recliner. And once you're in a recliner, it's really hard to leave a recliner. I got to tell you, I think that's my number one learning of the holiday weekend is that I have to get a recliner soon. You might catch me doing a show from a recliner momentarily. But for this game, okay, just a quick run through of this here. I know we all watched this and suffered together. The final score, I think it tells the full story, to be honest with you. It felt much closer than this, but the final score, 42-28. Outside of the first couple of minutes of the first half, and then once Louisville kind of bounced back in the second half, this was USC's game, start to finish.
Yep.
Holy shit, Miller Moss is good, man. Like, do you get the feeling that other teams do this like quarterback and point guard thing so much easier than Louisville? Like, I don't know what it is about this program. Obviously, we've had some greats, right? But at times it feels so difficult to just be average. and Miller Moss walks in, third string quarterback. Nope, throwing 6 touchdowns today. That's just how it goes. I mean, dude.
See that's the thing. Miller Moss wasn't the third string. He'd been the backup all season. People just think that he was the third string because Malachi Nelson entered the
Third
portal.
string in our hearts, right? Okay, you're right. Not technicalities. Third string in our hearts because Malachi Nelson, right, wasn't going to play this year as a 5-star quarterback. Miller Moss played, I think, in 3 or 4 games. Had a couple of rushing touchdowns, believe it or not, and a passing touchdown, I think, right? So, anyways, point being, Miller Moss, a decent guy. He's a 4-star, top 125 kid. And as I wrote about on the site, Matt, and I'm sure you did as well, it's like if Louisville doesn't do this and they don't do this, and they don't do this, then Miller Moss can do this. And we're like, but Louisville's going to do, 2 or 3 of these thises, and Miller Moss is never going to get going, but they didn't do any of it. And Miller Moss immediately hot from the get-go. Let's start here with the defensive woes. Well, let me first run through the stats. 42-28, Jack Plummer, 21 of 25, a relatively efficient game, but only 141 yards passing. Meanwhile, Miller Moss, 23 of 33, 372 yards, 6 TDs to that 1 interception from Quincy Riley. You would have thought that Miller Moss was the 6-year senior based off of the way that this game was played. We talked about the weapons that USC was missing and Louisville was missing. Jawar Jordan, Jamari Thrash. Louisville really didn't feel the impact of that at the running back spot because Isaac Guerendo, career day, 23 carries, 161 yards, 3 touchdowns. Probably should have gotten a little bit more work in the first half too.
Oh, I agree.
Mo Turner, 11 carries, 33 yards, was doing just fine, moved the sticks, caught some passes, did some nice things there. But ultimately, Isaac Guerendo was the MVP for Louisville this game. Just a true workhorse, like bell cow running back, made himself some money, you would hope. And then on the other side, like, again, you talked about the opt-outs, right? So we named several guys, right? From Marshawn Lloyd to Caleb Williams to Brendan Rice to the transfers of Mario Williams and Curtis Tackett and all these guys for USC. But what you saw was that their top receiver, Taj Washington, which, am I crazy or did he come from Syracuse? Did he not come from Syracuse? I could have sworn he did.
Don't think he did.
Maybe I got him mixed up with somebody else, but I could have sworn that he was a Syracuse transfer. But he balled, of course, because that's just what guys with the last name Washington have done to Louisville this year, right? Malik Washington with Virginia did the same thing. And then you had Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane. Jacoby and I talked about this at Christmas, Matt, on Monday. I said, look, bro.
The Lane family Christmas.
You got to take it easy on us, man. Like, you can't be torching us. And he's like, all right, man, I got you. Goes out.
And
smooth 3 for 60 and 2 touchdowns. And then defensively, Louisville, no sacks, really no tackles for loss to speak of. It was 3, well below their season average, and just a pedestrian game. They give up, again, that 372 yards passing, more than almost quadruple what they've given up on a game-by-game basis this year. Just insane, man. What are your thoughts when we talk about the defense? That's where we got to start. The coverage.
First and foremost, I do want to point out that I got the score prediction right. I just got the teams wrong. I did call a 42-28 game. I'm not going to say who I said was going to win, but it was a 42-28. But anyways, with all of the opt-outs that USC had on offense, now granted, Louisville had opt-outs too, but USC's offensive opt-outs were a lot more impactful. You had Caleb Williams, who was the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, their starting running back, their leader in touchdown receptions, and a couple other guys kind of smattered in there. The only position on that side of the ball that wasn't really impacted was offensive line. I think they were at relatively full force. So, I mean, given that Louisville had just come off of a defensive-minded performance against Florida State in the ACC championship, now granted they didn't win that, but they probably should have if the offense had even something close resembling a pulse. I honestly thought that Louisville's defense would perform a lot better in this game, just because this has been a team, for the most part, that's been anchored by their defense. When you think of Jeff Brohm-led team, you think of offense, you think of passing the ball. And in some regards, this was a team that was the complete opposite of what Jeff Brohm is normally known for. This was a team that found most of its offensive success running the ball. And overall, their defense was better than their offense. So I thought, okay, their defense should have a somewhat respectable showing against USC. I mean, now I know Lincoln Riley is one of the top offensive tacticians in all of college football, but I mean, the defense has been balling out. USC is heavily impacted by transfers and opt-outs in the NFL and all that. So I thought that this would be a game where Louisville should be able to hold their own.
Yeah,
I
and
I
good.
I didn't really take into account the fact that USC is one of like maybe five, six, seven programs where no matter who is not playing, the person behind them is more than likely a high 4-star or a 5-star. So like depth is like not a question for them. They're up there with like Bama, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, LSU. Like they're among that caliber of team where like whoever steps up in their place is probably like a top 300, top 250 type prospect. And I think ultimately that's what the biggest difference in this game was, not just on the defensive side. It just made itself more apparent on the defensive side for Louisville, is that USC's depth, while unproven, has untapped way more untapped talent, whereas Louisville's, it's an unknown commodity too, but the depth there in terms of overall talent is nowhere near on caliber for a USC, and that was fully exposed in the secondary. Now, I rewatching the game, I couldn't tell if it was just a couple really bad individual efforts or if it was a bad game plan. Because like I rewatched it the day after, and then I'd watched some highlights yesterday, and it seemed like now I'd probably have to rewatch it again, but I don't really want to. But it seemed like the coaching game plan was to play a lot of man to man, a lot of cover one, cover zero, where like a lot of guys are on islands where the safeties don't have a ton of help. And the safeties got burned. I
Yeah.
mean, Cam Kelly and Devin Neal, they were fantastic through the regular season and the ACC championship. They were terrible in this game. And then Storm Duck, whew, there ain't turkey on Thanksgiving. There's duck going to be on Thanksgiving. Like he didn't play a lot of snaps, but you knew he was out there whenever he was because Miller Moss picked on him the few snaps he was out there. He got burned a couple times for big plays. So it made me think, while the game plan might not have been the best, I'm not sure if they did play like more cover two, cover three, or switch to more like a zone look. I'm not sure that would have made a huge difference because it seemed like a lot of the defensive backs and a lot of the linebackers in the middle of the field. I mean, all night, except for those first two drives where they actually did look good, it seemed like all night long the defenders stepping back into coverage were like a step or two behind or a step or two too late to react. I don't know if that's something you picked up, but that's one of my bigger observations from the game.
Yeah, it looked like they were constantly just out of place. 2, 3 steps might be a little even generous. It felt like. I mean, there were times where there were guys out of frame, and you're like, "Where's the guy
Yeah.
covering that guy at?" It was so uncharacteristic of a defense that played sound football for most of the year. Now, they obviously had their lapses. You could go out and point out particular quarters, particular games where they struggled, but after, like you mentioned, Matt, after Florida State, defensively, you didn't expect Louisville to necessarily struggle at all because it's a
No?
backup quarterback, a young guy making his first start without his running back, without his second receiver, without, key pieces all over the place. The team looks different, coaches are leaving. You don't expect for that guy to play with so much poise and to be able to pick your defense apart. And I don't know from a scheme standpoint what it was, but it just looked off. Everything looked off. I don't know if, they lost their focus at the zoo. Like the San Diego Zoo is pretty cool. From what I've heard, I've never been there. But
I wanted to go to San Diego just to go to the zoo, but I
right,
mean,
exactly.
that's
Who can blame them?
expensive.
Like that was the bowl game for them, maybe. I don't know. Like that was the trip and the Top Gun Museum or whatever that was. And Petco Park as a whole, playing in a baseball stadium. Like it's just like, again, the moment was too big for them. And I shouldn't say again because in the ACC championship it wasn't, but this moment was just I don't know. I really don't know what
They
it
didn't
is.
look prepared.
No, and
Straight
guys,
up, they didn't. No, offense, defense, special teams, they did not look prepared.
no, it was rough to watch, and you saw guys who are going to be making decisions to head off to the league, like a Storm Duck, right? And Jarvis Brownlee really kind of hurt themselves, like their stock is not looking great after that game. The only one who really did really absolutely helped himself was Quincy Riley.
Quincy
Like
Riley,
Quincy
yeah.
Riley was like when everyone else is so bad, you stand out like a sore thumb, and that's what it was for him. Obviously, having that interception, which at the beginning of the second half gave Louisville every opportunity to come back. And what was so frustrating defensively was, look, I get that they were down 14. Sometimes they were down, 17 points, but Louisville pulled it back within 7 after the Evan Conley touchdown. Louisville pulled it back within 7 after the Isaac Guerendo touchdown in the second half. They did what they had to do, but each time it was like we flashed back to 2017 or 2019 or 2020 or 2021. You pick your year where the defense just gave up big play after big play after big play, and you have these stat lines for these receivers who have 2 catches to 75 yards, 3 catches for 60 yards, 1 catch for 44 and a touchdown, 1 catch for 32 yards. So they just really picked Louisville's secondary apart, and what really hurt them the most was that I feel like in most games the pressure from the defensive front 7 or front 4 for the most part makes it trickier for the quarterback to be able to take advantage of some of that man-to-man, some of those islands, right? And in this
Yeah.
game, I don't know what your eyes saw. I have not rewatched the game in full transparency, but just reading through my notes, and it just again seemed like the defense was moving a step slower, a step behind. The pass rush was wide angles, really, really hard lanes to get to. They weren't necessarily blowing plays up. Jared Dawson had a freaking fantastic play. I don't know if that was in the second half or what that was,
I
but
think it was in the second half, yeah.
yeah, but for the most part, Ashton
Yeah,
Jawani was a no-show essentially, for a guy who was, looking to, I know obviously coming back now, but really
dude was an
provided no
All-American and
impact.
didn't log
Right.
a single stat.
Yeah, not a single, we call that cardio. And no, I mean, and all jokes aside, like, he had impact on the game. Like you did see him getting close with some of his hurries, but ultimately, when Miller Moss was able to roll out and make some of these throws that he did, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all failures across the board.
When the defense was operating at its peak during like the middle of the season, like in the game against Duke, the game against Virginia Tech, I mean, it was not just one unit of the defense, it was complementary football. The front 7 and specifically the defensive line was doing a really good job getting home on their pressures and then helping them out on the back end. The coverage had been getting a little bit tighter. Like the man coverage, they were staying on the receiver's hip. The zones were a little bit more crisp. They were keeping quarterbacks on their toes. I mean, both areas of the field were kind of working with each other. And in this game, they worked against each other almost because they were outside of those first 2 drives where like they were able to get some pressure on Miller Moss. They were almost a non-factor. I mean, there were several plays in that game where Moss had several seconds just to stand there and kind of go through his reads, make the right decisions. And the thing is, he didn't really need to go through his reads all that often because more often than not, the first 1, 2, maybe the third guy was wide open because the secondary was having trouble keeping guys in front.
Yeah, and it was the true kind of big bugaboo for them in this game that cost them, gave them obviously the fits from a 42-point standpoint for the quarterback to throw 6 touchdowns. I mean, it's just it's a shame that in this game, I won't say with this on the line being 11 wins as if that's some like amazing feat. It is a great season, and it really does. Each win over 10 really kind of like moves the pendulum that much further towards having, one of the best seasons in program history. Obviously we're going to talk a lot more in detail over the coming weeks about the missed opportunities, but Louisville still had a great year. And this game was the slam dunk to kind of finish it off. And, switching sides of the ball, when you look at what USC was coming into this game, they were one of the worst defenses in Power 5 football. I mean, that's not hyperbole.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. As I mentioned last week, just running through this, 28 points to San Jose State, 28 points to Arizona State, 41 to Colorado,
49 to Cal.
Right, 49 to Cal, 41 to Arizona, 48 to Notre Dame, 34 to Utah, 52 to Washington, 36 to Oregon. So they've given up points all year long. They fired their defensive coordinator after the loss to Washington because of it. But this game, it's 1-game season. What have you done for me lately? They showed up and they came ready to play. And I mentioned this on the show, but one area where I thought Louisville had the chance to be kind of impacted by the players who stayed back was on that front four for USC, because they did have guys like Bear Alexander. They did have guys like Solomon Byrd. They did have, in the front seven, they had their leading tackler in Mason Cobb, who played in this game and was a big part of it, Bryson Shaw. So they had guys who had been impact players for them all year. And with time to prepare, with time to let it click, it was very clear that they came into this game ready to go. However, they couldn't stop the run, and that was fine. They could let Isaac probably run for 300 yards in this game, and it really, maybe a 14-point difference, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. They clearly felt like they could sell out on stopping Jack Plummer, and I don't know. Let's start with this. Jack hits his hand on the helmet or gets banged up and goes to the tent. Brock Doman comes in. Jack eventually comes back in. What are your thoughts? Because at that point, the offense is stale. There's nothing really happening. It felt right to go to somebody else for a couple of drives potentially. Were you a little surprised that Brohm didn't make the change? To me, it just felt like at this point, Brohm is just like indebted to Jack Plummer. Like, I have to play you, Jack. I can't bench you again. That can't be my narrative for your career, is that in the final game, he could have even said he was injured, but in the final game, I can't bench you, despite the fact that it's very clear we need something else.
Yeah, it's one thing if prior to the injury, Jack was like firing on all cylinders, hitting guys in stride, having good command of the pocket, showing awareness, and then he suffers an injury and Brohm opts to keep him in. It's one thing if he was doing that. He really wasn't. I mean, you look at the stat line, yeah, he went 21 for 25, but yeah, that's an efficient stat line, but a lot of his throws were off the mark. They weren't hitting receivers in stride. I mean, perfect example was the throw to Jaden Thompson, where if it's thrown on the money, he converts that at the minimum for a first down and has a chance to go for a touchdown right there in the red zone. Instead, it's way out in front of Thompson. He catches it, but he stumbles to the point where he falls well short of the sticks. And I'll say this: did Jack Plummer play a factor in the offense's struggles in this game? Absolutely. There's no question about that. I mean, it's something honestly that with a lot of Louisville's losses this season, like when you try and summarize the reasons as to why, half of them are probably because of Jack Plummer and his decision making and some of his turnovers. But an underrated storyline, not only from this game, but from the second half of the season onwards, like after the Pitt game, the receiving core really struggled. The outside of Jamari Thrash, who is going to be making money and playing on Sundays, no one in that receiving core could really generate separation with much consistency at all. Chris Bell showed flashes. Amari Huggins-Bruce showed flashes. Kevin Coleman, when he wasn't being busy being the return man exclusively by the staff for some reason, he showed flashes. But no one really displayed consistency when going downfield and going up against man zone, whatever. No one else besides Thrash really was able to consistently generate separation between them and their defenders. And for as much crap as the fan base gives Jack, some of it justified, it's not really all on him. And that's probably why you're seeing Brohm hit the portal so hard with some of these impact receivers like Ja'Cory Brooks, like Colin Lacey. And I wouldn't be shocked if they try and go for another one. Because, I mean, a common theme with this passing attack is that while Jack Plummer had his faults, the receiving core didn't really do him any favors sometimes. I mean, I'm not crazy for thinking that, because like if you try and watch some of these highlights or the all 22 and you watch any receiver not named Thrash try and break away from their man or find the hole in the zone, no one's consistently doing it. And so people want to get on Jack for like, oh, all he did was check down to the tight end or check down to the running back. That's all he could do in this game. No one else could generate any separation downfield. What do you want him to throw into tight coverage with a guy right on his hip, or throw into double or triple coverage? You'll still be pissed at him regardless.
Yeah, I think the thing in this game was they needed somebody to overcome those struggles. They needed that late in the season, right? And I don't think we talked about that enough on the show is how much some of these other receivers, I don't want to say struggling, but it wasn't breaking through. It wasn't doing enough to propel your offense to that next level, right? Like if you just look at the end of the season and you go game by game and you look at what Louisville's leading receiver did, it's not really great, right? Like after
Hmm.
Duke, you got Chris Bell led the team with receiving at 43 yards. Against Virginia, Mari Huggins-Bruce had 52. Kevin Coleman against Miami had 58. All of those came on one play. Jamari Thrash had 60 and 57 respectively against Kentucky and Florida State with one hand. And then in this game, Isaac Guerendo is your leading receiver with 42 yards. So on the season, Matt, Chris Bell finishes the season as the second leading receiver with 407 yards. They never developed a consistent number two. And I think part
Hmm.
of that was because their roles all changed drastically. Now, part of this is like separation has nothing to do with role. That's just whether you're a good route runner and whether you're, good
Right.
with your fakes and whether you're good with your footwork and all of that. But I do feel like they had to move their roles around so much because Jamari Thrash went out for that one game. And then, is he going to play it all? And then he comes back. And then they're still trying to throw to him like he is the number one guy when meanwhile all
Yeah.
these other guys are carrying the weight of that. It just felt very clunky. And then the Nate Kariski emergence at the end of the year was just weird. The whole thing late down the stretch was just weird with the receiving core. But what we saw in this game was that nobody was doing anything. I mean, I don't mean to be blunt like that, but when you look at the data in this, it's just shameful. It's just shameful against the defense that gave up all those points that we just talked about, Matt, for your top
Hmm.
receiver to be your running back with 42 yards. And then you have
Yeah.
Kevin Coleman with 26 yards on 3 receptions. Now, part of that is Jack, and what I'm getting to is Jack threw the ball. I would love to see the average of his attempts, like how far he threw the ball. I would say his furthest pass, yeah, I think he had one big play maybe in this game, but maybe outside of that, his furthest pass was about 15 yards. Everything
If
else
I
was less than 7 or 8 yards.
if I remember correctly, now I'm pulling it up like as we speak, but I've already looked at the numbers firsthand, so I kind of have some sort of baseline. I was actually looking into that right after the game, like when the PFF numbers came out, just because like I'm like you said, Jacob, going through and I'm like, yeah, he didn't really seem like he threw downfield at all hardly, and he really didn't. Just give me 1 second. Let me
I
get
think
the
he took one deep shot to Amari Huggins-Bruce, and then maybe one coming out of that second half drive where you're like, "What the hell are you doing, Jeff? Why are you coming out throwing the ball 3 straight times, going 3 and out after you get the ball at halftime?" And it was just the play calling on the passing was very clunky in itself. But
This is what it is. He
let's hear.
attempted only 3 passes that went further than 10 yards downfield.
Yeah,
Three. 10 of his passes were thrown in between the numbers between like within the next 10 yards between that and the line of scrimmage. And he attempted 7 passes that went behind the line of
yeah.
scrimmage. There was no downfield passing attack mentality from Plummer or the play calling whatsoever.
Yeah, and you're not gonna, and again, these bowl games are somewhat a joke, like in terms of they don't matter. Half to look at the Florida State Georgia game. Like that's JV Florida State or JV Georgia and Florida State playing in that game. Like that's not the same teams, right? But in these bowl games, what you have to do for the most part is you have to get creative with your play calling. You have to be aggressive. You can't be conservative and just try to run the ball in between the tackles or just try to throw the ball side to side for 3-4 yards here and there. You've got to take deep field shots. You've got to look to move the change in bunches. And in this game, they just didn't do it. And I thought it was a true testament that when you've had almost a month to prepare, you have a 6-year quarterback. And this is the strategy that you come out with that you just weren't prepared for this game. Like, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's fine. But for a coach who was 5-1 in bowl games coming into this, I just expected more. And the conversation about Jack, we're going to get into this in depth, but like, I think that it's just as much a conversation about Jeff Brohm as it is about Jack's struggles, because ultimately, as the head coach, it's up to you to realize when your quarterback isn't giving your offense what it needs. And I get you have a hand injury, things happen, but you've got to open the playbook up. You've got to trust your quarterback to do it. And if not, put somebody else in. Put Brock Doman in. We saw what he could do last year against Cincinnati. I know it's not USC, but this defense was garbage, Matt. Just garbage.
Especially since you have a built-in excuse to bench Plummer because of his hand injury. Like you've got the perfect cover to bench Plummer for his performance. Like just say that he got hurt and just lie. Just have Brohm and Plummer get together and say, yeah, I know you didn't play well, but we're going to say you hurt your pinky and you couldn't really grip the ball. Like just and then we'd literally be none the wiser. Then instead we're having this discussion, like how you had the perfect built-in reasoning and logic to make a quarterback change. And maybe you should have, hindsight's always 2020, but
right.
It says a lot that he opted to stick with Plummer, even with a dislocated pinky.
I would love for you to have that be your question when you speak to him next, is what went into not making a quarterback change? Was it ever on the table, whether it be in the bowl game or other games? I feel like he's going to give you the runaround of, we're always evaluating, we're always looking to compete, and, we're going to play guys that we think give us the best chance to win. But, I heard, I saw somebody, I think it might have been, I'm not even going to say who, I don't know who it was, to be honest with you, but I saw a point on Twitter this weekend, and it's something that I brought up a couple weeks ago, is that anger at Jack Plummer is misdirected anger with Jeff Brohm. Right? Because as my good friend has said all year when talking about Jack Plummer, if he's not it, why isn't somebody else playing? And if the answer is, well, there's not somebody else, why not? That's the question, right? When you have a quarterback guru, is how do you not have somebody ready to go? And in this game, I really did expect that we were going to see Pierce Clarkson. I really did expect to see Brady Allen. I know you mentioned Brock Doman. We saw Evan Conley, and shout out to Evan for the walk-off career touchdown, but it's just frustrating that there was just no ability to spark a passing offense. Isaac's having the game of his life, and really you could have controlled this game with just a hint of a passing game. And like I said, Matt, a lot of it is bad throws. Like Jeff Brohm can't have made a better play call in the Jaden Thompson. I know for third down play where he just didn't get there. But at the other times, like and I keep going back to this, we saw this several times this year. You have so much success in the first half running the football. You struggle down the end of the half. Jack takes that sack into the halftime, and you come out and you throw the ball 3 straight times and have to give the ball right back to USC. Ultimately, it shakes out because you pick the pass off the next drive with Quincy Riley, and you get the ball back and you score and you bring it back to a 7-point game. But still, like, you score in that first play there, that first drive, and you have a much different opportunity in front of you. And so it's just frustrating all the way around. Final things before we go to a break here, Matt. Anything that you have to close the book on? It's a disappointing end to a season. It feels a lot like 2016. It really does. To be so close and kind of have it just 3 straight losses to end the season. But what in the 30 seconds or less here, what do you think? And just final thoughts.
I just think that it was a successful season, no doubt. I mean, 10 wins, first berth in the ACC championship. But I can't help but wonder, like, it could have been so much more, and it could have been a truly special season for Louisville, and the opportunity just blew them by.
It did. And as I mentioned, we'll talk about this much more in depth over the coming weeks, and we will continue on here on the other side of the break, talking about the portal and what's next. But there's a lot of interesting notes that will come out of this, a lot of stats and data, I think, that will help to kind of tell the story of what Louisville was pre-Jamari Thrash, Jawar Jordan, and what they were post-Jamari Thrash and Jawar Jordan in terms of health. So definitely going to be interesting. It's disappointing, but anytime you can get to 10 wins, it's something that should be celebrated. So we'll be right back on the other side. We will talk transfer portal, some big news today right before we hit record on the show. Some key players hitting the portal. Louisville in on some big names. The roster is changing. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. From the Pink Seats podcast is brought to you by the fine folks at Frankfort Avenue Liquor and Wine. You can find them at 2115 Frankfort Avenue, right next to the Manhattan Project. Full bar service and a full liquor store. Stop in there today and tell them From the Pink Seats podcast sent you. All right, we're back on the Pink Seats podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Frankfort Avenue Liquors and Wine. Again, you can find them at 2115 Frankfort Avenue, right next to the Manhattan Project in the Clifton neighborhood. Go get you anything you need there. Make that the place where you stock up pregame, postgame. Go for pregame. pregame there, then go to whatever your game that you're going to. Conveniently located right near downtown. Great spot. They have their own dedicated parking lot, which I know in some of those spots can be a little bit tricky. So shout out to them. Be sure that when you stop in there that you tell them that you heard us talking about them here right on from the Pink Seats podcast. Matt, the transfer portal is moving. It's churning. Things kind of slowed down right there, right before the bowl game, but you knew as soon as the bowl game happened that there would be more movement. And that's exactly what's happened since that game finished up on Wednesday night. Louisville has had a couple more portal entries, with the most notable coming here in the last couple of hours. Offensively, really, they're probably most impactful transfer so far in this cycle. And that is Huggins-Bruce. He's played in a lot of career games for Louisville. He's a 3-year junior, came in 2019, and really found a role, had his best year as a freshman. Or maybe that was 2020. I can't remember what year.
2020,
but,
yeah.
2020, yeah. Really came in and kind of felt that impact, and really thought he was going to be the next kind of Tutu Atwell. And unfortunately, as I just tweeted out, it just felt like even with Jeff Brohm and Scott Satterfield, that no coach was ever able to get the most out of him in terms of how they utilized him. I think that when you saw the ball in his hands this year, you think of the big play against Boston College. You think of the, ultimately one of the big reasons they pulled that win off against Virginia at home was the Huggins-Bruce 72-yard bomb. He had his moments, but ultimately, again, when you look at the wide receivers in that group, no one really developed into that second guy. And for him, behind some of the names he's played behind, he never was able to truly develop into that second guy. And so here's to hoping he finds his Russ Yee spot. I think that's the dream for a guy like that who has given a lot to Louisville, that he'll find a place, and ultimately they'll put him in the right spot, and he'll be able to go on and have a career like Russ Yee's now starting for the Rams, former 7th-round pick. So what do you think about Huggins-Bruce? How big of a loss is that?
Yeah, it's definitely impactful. I can't say I'm super surprised that it happened, because it seemed like it was bound to, because like you said, Jacob, he, no matter what coach, whether it be Scott Satterfield or Jeff Brohm, he was never really properly utilized or used. Like, it seemed like ever since he was a freshman, you could see his flashes of potential, but that's all you really kept seeing, was just flashes and flashes and flashes. He never really had a consistent role. And I'm not sure how much of that was like, maybe he didn't develop more so, but it seemed like he wasn't really put in the position to consistently have success. And I am not really sure why, because now it was a thing under Scott Satterfield, and then Brohm, I don't think he utilized him as much as he should have. So now that we've had this happen under two coaches, maybe with him being the common denominator, maybe it's a him thing versus the coach thing. But it's still, regardless of who was the OC, it seemed like they could have done more to utilize him and his talents and his ability as a ball carrier.
Yeah. I just always thought that you thought he should be utilized this way, and then they used him like this, and then you would say, well, why don't you do this? And then they would do it like this. In both staffs, it was just a mystery as to no one could, really unlock that talent. But now he'll go into the portal, and he joins a growing list here. I think we're up to 11 now for Louisville overall, with Josh Minkins kind of being that first big name, now heading off to West Virginia. We saw Cam Wilson commit to Cincinnati the last couple of days. Popeye Williams will join Lance Taylor up at Western Michigan. So these guys are slowly starting to find homes. And now Huggins-Bruce is joined by Keith Brown, the linebacker who transferred in last year from Oregon. Didn't ever really materialize into finding a role behind the emergence of TJ Quinn and Jalen Alderman, but still a depth piece. So Louisville will have to look to replace that. You would expect a big, kind of a role shift for Stanquan Clark heading into next year as that third linebacker. And then the final guy going into the portal yesterday was offensive tackle Vincent Lumia, who did not play, I don't believe, this season. I'm not sure exactly
why. Played in one game, and that was against Murray State.
Murray State. Okay. So played against Murray State, but was another guy that they got out of the portal last year from Duquesne. So 11 guys out, 16 guys in, with potential for 2 more to hit this weekend, maybe even more. We'll see. I know Brady Brady Brom's already been sending out the Brady alert, so we know something is happening. But we know that Louisville is currently, or will currently, or I shouldn't say will currently, but will host a couple of more impactful transfers, and that is, let's see here, what we got. How do we say Scorton? Nick Scorton?
Scourton is how I've been
Scourton.
pronouncing it.
Okay, I was gonna have a lot more fun
I'm
with that
probably
one during the
dead ass
season.
wrong, but you know
Yeah,
how these things
you
go.
know that's not a strength of ours, his name pronunciation. But
Yeah.
led the Big Ten in sacks last season at Purdue, or
Yep.
was at the top of the list.
Yeah,
Is a
he led the Big Ten in sacks. Yes.
yeah, and is an edge rusher who plays at 6'4". What is it? 6'4", 280. Man, that's an athlete, dude. Like,
He's a big boy.
oh, that's a Yaya Diaby on the edge right there. I mean, that's a big addition, and you add him to the mix with Ashton Gelati coming back. That's and then Mason. You're talking about somewhere between like 25 to 30 sacks just between those three guys this season. That would be a huge addition. Louisville needs another pass rusher. We saw late that pass rush really faded. I think Ashton only had maybe 1 or 2 sacks down the final 4 games. While Mason, same deal, really didn't do much.
Yeah.
It was, some of those secondary guys getting sacks. But the other one, and this is the one that kind of came out of nowhere, that is, I'm going to hope that this is as easy as it looks to pronounce. Penny Penny Boone, baby, out of Toledo, the MAC Offensive Player of the Year in 2023. And you want to talk about a bruiser, bro. Like, you just saw what Isaac Guerendo did against USC. Imagine what a fella who is 6'1", 242 will do to you. Offensive Player of the Year. This isn't a goal line back, Matt. This isn't a Jeremy Smith. This isn't just a big boy, right? This is the combination of speed, size, athleticism. What are your thoughts? What are you hearing? What's it look like it's going to happen with Louisville over the coming days?
I know, like you said, Brady Brom's already had his little Brady Brom bomb on Twitter. I know who it is. I don't know what the timing is going to be, but just expect for Louisville to get some help on the secondary, and that's all I'll say there. I know fans are wanting to hear about what's going on with Jalen Lucas, the IU transfer, who was a freshman All-American as a kick returner. But I mean, I think Penny Boone would probably be a much bigger addition because this dude's built like a Mack truck, but he's got the wheels of a Ferrari. Like he's like the all-encompassing package that you would want out of a running back. Now, will that translate from the MAC to the ACC? We'll see. But I mean, like at the very minimum, you've got a guy who's 240, 6'1", something like that. Like he's a big boy. So I personally would be more excited if Boone was to commit than Lucas, but hey, I'm not going to take either one of them. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then with Scourton, if he does commit to Louisville, I don't expect it to be soon because he's going to be visiting Louisville on January 4th, a few days after the New Year. And he's in line to visit Florida State the day before on January 3rd. And I think he said he was also interested in Colorado, Texas A&M, and a couple other Texas schools because he is from Texas. So, of course, the Texas schools have been ringing off the hook. So there could be more visits downwind for him. So I wouldn't expect for Scourton to make a choice anytime soon. But Penny Boone is already declared a top 3 of Louisville, Florida State, and Kentucky. So even if Louisville doesn't get Penny Boone, they will be seeing Penny Boone probably in some form or fashion. I can't remember if does Louisville play Florida State in 2024?
I don't think so. I really don't think so, but I also don't know. So I don't know.
Well, they play Kentucky. I know that for sure. So even if Louisville does not get Penny Boone, there's a very good chance they'll still be seeing Penny Boone. So it would behoove Louisville to be the one with Penny Boone and not against Penny Boone.
That's right. And when you look at, say they do add Penny Boone into the mix, that will pair him with Mo Turner, Donald Chaney Jr., who committed from Miami a few weeks back, and then you bring back Keywan Brown, who was a redshirt this past year. You bring in the 2 running backs, not Deuce Adams, but Duke Watson and
Isaac Brown.
Isaac Brown. So you're really building out a nice stable of running backs there. And I think that, an addition like Boone is what they need. And here's, I told you earlier, I had a take for the show. And here's what it is. When I look at the portal, I'm very excited about a lot of this, Matt. But I'm having a hard time looking at this and saying where Louisville is upgraded. Now, I know the easy ones are defensive line with Thor Griffith. Like, that's a massive upgrade, probably an NFL potential defensive lineman. And then Mark Redmond and Tanner Kazuli. I don't know. Not good with names here.
All is how I was pronouncing it.
All. Okay. From Ball State. So, again, you get some talented weapons there. But is Colin Lacey better than Jamari Thrash? I don't know. I guess
I
that's
know Ja'Cory Brooks is, that's for sure.
You think he's better than Jamari Thrash? That's interesting because I would say that Jamari Thrash, I mean, I know he didn't play at Alabama, but Jamari Thrash came in with production, whereas Ja'Cory Brooks, he's been out, played what, 3 games in 2022?
He was hurt. That's why.
That's true. That's right. But Louisville, think about it though. Louisville's added a lot of those transfers of guys who missed seasons, and some have hit, some haven't. But what I'm getting at is, okay, take Ja'Cory Brooks out, take out Thor Griffith, take out Colin Lacey. Where has Louisville upgraded their roster, right? Corey Thornton, I'm not sure he's an upgrade over Quincy Riley or even close to it, right? So that means to me, you better go out and you better land another big name at corner. Tyler Shuck, we've been told he's better than Jack Plummer, but he's not played more than 7 games in a season his whole career. Again, COVID happened in one of his seasons, but this is a guy who hasn't played a ton of football and hasn't won a ton of games overall, and in terms of like at the highest level. And so you're talking about, again, maybe you have another game manager quarterback, right? And then on the offensive line, like I really like Monroe Mills.
Monroe Mills is one of the better transfers for sure.
And that's where you could probably make the argument that on the left side, maybe you're getting better. On the right side, you're getting better wherever he ends up playing. And Jonathan Mendoza, again, look, the addition that a guy who's 6'9" brings to your team, you don't need me to tell you. But like, is the offensive lineman from Northern Illinois who's likely going to play center, is that better than Brian Hudson? Are you getting better on the interior of the offensive line? Victor Cutler, I mean, he's probably a depth guy. We did see Lance Robinson play a lot in this game and looked fairly good. My point being, Matt, this is not me shitting on the class, right? I'm very much aware that this is a dope class. Like, I love Ja'Cory Brooks. I love Donald Chaney. I love Thor Griffith. Like, I think Thor Griffith is going to be probably the best transfer out of this class. My point is, you better go up from here. You better go out and get impactful winning guys. No more depth guys. No more, guys that have potential. No more guys that had big years 2-3 years ago. No, Louisville needs to add starters, particularly at corner. Louisville needs to add starters, probably at wide receiver. Louisville needs to. I mean, look, I get that a lot of folks are really comfortable with the quarterback situation. I would just keep an open mind about it and continue to see what's out there because it's about winning. And I still think after what we saw against USC, Matt, and what we saw down the end of the year, you need more skill in positions outside of quarterback. And even at quarterback, if you're going to take this team to that level, go to the playoff. That was the difference in 10 wins and going to a college football playoff, right? And I know we're happy with 10 wins. Well, we love it. We'll take 10 wins, Matt, but we're not happy with the Pittsburgh loss. We're not happy with how Louisville, really flunked out of the ACC championship, for lack of better terminology. There's room to grow. And my point is, so far, Matt, there's like Mark Redmond and Thor Griffith and a couple of these guys, Ja'Cory Brooks, Colin Lacey, really nice starts, big names, big pieces, but we need like 4 more of them. Like those caliber. Like they need to go out and they need to land some big name transfers from the portal. And I think they will. So again, me not shitting on this class. That's not what I'm doing here. Don't take it as that. Matt's giggling in the background. Knows I'm probably going to get in trouble a little bit. My point is that we've got to be careful about what is added to replace. And you need to go out and you need to upgrade at each spot from this point on. You need to get another corner. You need to get probably a safety. So there's a lot of work left to be done, but I have faith that they'll do it. And look, hey, the staff looks like they're going to stay together for the most part, knock on wood. So that's good.
Why would you say that out loud? Because you said that someone's going to leave.
I know. And I thought that before I said it, and then it was already kind of like sneaking out, and there really wasn't much that I could do at that point. So I don't have impact on these things. I'm not out here working the phones, trying to get guys to move. I want guys to stay. And I think that's what's going to happen. And if I'm wrong, it's not the first time. So overall, though, there's a lot of time, right? The signing period.
And now that you have like some because like the transfer portal activity was never going to be like completely done like right now, just because there was always going to be a handful of guys leave after the bowl, like once they have the final opportunity to play for the season. And I mean, I'm not a betting man. Well, that's a lie. I'm a betting man. I'm just bad at it. Um, I do think there's probably going to be a handful more into the portal. Who exactly? I'm not really completely sure, but I would be a little bit surprised if Louisville didn't see a few more guys enter the portal between now and when the window closes on January 4th. But hey, if they don't, then they're able to, they liked what they saw in the guys that did say, or maybe the guys that were thinking about jumping into the portal, maybe they like with their outlook for next season. But I'm fully expecting there to be more transfer portal activity over the next couple of days, and then from there they can assess the situation, because, like you said, I think corner is probably definitely another spot they need to look at. I do really like Corey Thornton, the UCF transfer. He's a long rangy type of corner who's been productive for a while now, but Tayon Holloway, he's probably going to be more of a depth guy. I don't foresee him being a starter. So I do agree with you there that they do definitely need to go after another starting corner. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
the,
grab a linebacker for
yeah,
depth purposes, or
I
maybe
think
even to
so.
start.
Yeah.
Because I mean, TJ Quinn, he's coming back, right? And I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. You have Quinn and Alderman back, plus Stanquan Clark, right? So your core is still really young there. They're all sophomores and juniors, essentially. So a really young core that will continue to develop there. But when you mention the cornerbacks, the hope is that a guy like Marcus Washington, who came over from Georgia last year, can take a step and become a contributor. You're hoping that, from a safety standpoint, D'Angelo Hutchinson will continue to take steps, that these guys who have been reserve guys can get in the mix. And then obviously the dark horse in all of this is Aaron Williams, who was a 4-star corner at Bosco Prep last year, right? And he missed this whole season recovering from a torn ACL, but he is still around. So there's another guy like that who is young with NFL talent all over him that you can throw into the mix. So there are pieces, but you need to. I guess I'm not. There's a reason why I don't work in media, right? Not 100% great at articulating myself all the time. But the point being is that you just need to add impactful guys. Like that's the goal from now on, and not depth pieces unless you have to in certain places. So another
Right.
place that'll be really interesting to see what happens is the kicker spot. Nick Lopez went into the portal. Who, for those of you who are asking, who is that? He played sparingly this season, mostly kicked extra points, but did come into the game late in the year when Brock Trevelstead was benched against Florida State or Kentucky. I cannot remember what game that was. One of those two games, maybe Miami.
I think it was earlier in the year. I think it was Miami.
Yeah, Miami. It was late. It was one of those final couple of games in the year. But yeah, was
Yeah.
benched, and ultimately Jeff Brohm kind of showed confidence and stayed with Travelstead. So Nick Lopez goes into the portal. I believe Travelstead is back next season. I believe just
Yes,
will
he
be a
is.
junior or senior. So we'll see if they bring somebody in to compete with him as a kicker. And then they do have some of the other young guys. Brady Hodges played punter most of the year. It looks like he will return. So it'll be interesting. There's a lot of work to be done before the portal closes on the 4th, as Matt mentioned. And then we head into the spring where spring football, a lot of these guys will go out, they'll compete, and then we'll see this happen again. And guys will go out, and that's where you get your Storm Ducks and your Cameron Kellys and, some of those guys who go to one location and then ultimately choose to go back into the portal, or guys who, feel like they just want to compete and see where they shake out and then go back into the portal or go into the portal in the spring. So a lot of time. But you've got to love the fact that on 83 scholarships on a roster, and you have 11 of your players in the portal only, most of which are depth guys. And so that's a win for Louisville. I mean, that just shows you what the staff has pitched and sold to this team, that those guys are buying in, that they believe that this is just the beginning for Louisville, and that it's all about sticking around, working hard to earn your keeps and go from there. So a lot to be excited about. And then, we talked a lot with Grant Mulligan last week on the recruiting front, Matt, but I do think that you have guys in this class who could see the field next year and be, meaningful contributors. I don't necessarily think that Jeff Brom's going to play young offensive linemen. We do see some of the defensive linemen, so you never know about a guy like, say, like Xavier Porter being able to contribute out there. He's one of the higher ranked players in the class, but I do think that JoJo Stone, Dylan Messman, some of these skill position players, Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, they're going to have the chance to contribute, and that's going to make Louisville better that next year. They didn't really have a ton of that this year. Outside of a couple of the freshmen who did play, there really wasn't many who were able to get meaningful snaps and be part of the class or on the field. But I think that might change with like a Sean Boykin Jr. next year. Like, I would not be shocked at all if he plays quite a bit as a freshman, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he didn't play.
Right. No, like the high school recruiting class for Louisville this cycle was their strength was offensive skill position. So if anyone from this class is going to see the field early, it's going to be one of those handful of guys or probably Xavier Porter. Because I mean, Louisville does have, I don't want to say a hole at edge rusher, but I mean, you've got Ashton, you've got Mason, who are probably going to be your starters right now. But behind them, you don't really have like a lot of proven depth. I mean, you've got Adonai Green and a couple other guys in that mix, but they probably need at least one more like go-to edge rusher off the bench. So maybe that could be Xavier Porter if he develops. Maybe it could be Nick Scourton. We don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, dude, when you look at Maurice Davis, he's not going to play a lot this year, but 6'5", 210, dude, like that's the frame you want on an edge rusher. Like that's NFL. Like imagine if Yasir Abdullah had that body, 6'5", 210, man. Like that dude's got all the potential in the world. So it's going to be interesting to watch all these guys develop, and then we'll see some of these guys from the class this year. Kataris Hicks, William Fowles, Jaleel McClain, Jamari Johnson got his ass chewed out in that game several times on Wednesday night. Jamari Johnson did not make Jack Plummer happy.
Yeah, let's hope the tight end blocking is a little bit better next season.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Unfortunate not to have better results coming out of the holidays, but look, there's still a lot of time to continue to grow the program, get them going in the right direction. Ultimately, that's what happened this year. Louisville's got the guy to do it. He's locked in on like an 18-year deal now after all these bonuses hit. Jeff Brohm's feeling pretty comfortable here. Thank you all. Be sure to follow us on social media at Pink Seats Pod, at U of L Report, at the State of Lou. Check out the show anywhere that you download your podcast from. We will be back soon. I don't know with what, and I don't know with when, but you stick around, turn those notifications on, and you will be the first to find out. But until then, go Cards.